Our experience of Bach's music is as varied and unique as the music of Bach himself. I'm Steve Starrick, and welcome to a series of conversations with the musicians, the participants in the workshops, and the members of the audience of the Bach Society of Minnesota. Joining me is Christopher Olson, jazz guitarist in the Twin Cities, an instructor of jazz guitar at the McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul, and I want to say instrumental, in performing with the Bach Society of Minnesota when they do their Bach and jazz performances. Chris, what was your first experience with the music of Johann Sebastian Bach?
Oh, probably.
Do you remember?
Probably when I was taking piano lessons when I was young. I'm sure I played a couple of the early Bach pieces, the Anna Magdalena things that I didn't get too deeply into anything. I wasn't too deeply into music. I quit band in 9th grade, and I quit piano in, I don't know, 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that.
So how did you become a jazz guitarist?
Well, I started playing guitar then on my own when I was 14 or 15, and just self-taught in the basement, and then suddenly I'm a senior in high school, and I did get back into music at the school, sang in the choir, sang some Bach there, and played in the jazz band at the school, played guitar in the jazz band, and realized that I didn't want to do anything else, so I better figure out where to go for music. So then it happened to be, I hate to say this, but 1985 when I graduated, but it happens to be a birthday of Bach.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to college, Bach was all over the place. So certainly I probably heard more, maybe more Bach than I would have any other year going to college, and was exposed to him a great deal, and studied some classical guitar and started playing music written by Bach. He didn't write for guitar. Much of his music has been transcribed for guitar, particularly the music he wrote for lute, which is as close as he got to guitar.
Now, I understand when you're teaching at McNally Smith College of Music that sometimes you give your guitar students transcriptions of the partitas, sonatas for solo violin. Why would you do such a thing?
Well, this is going back to playing a couple of them when I was an undergrad, and just noticing how the chords are outlined is similar to how jazz improvisers outline chords. And then when I went to graduate school, my teacher at the University of North Texas, Fred Hamilton, made each of his students play a Bach partita every semester, as well as transcribe solos of great jazz artists. And so I would play something by Bach and Wes Montgomery as my final project, and
Did you find that playing Bach along with Wes Montgomery, was it relevant to what you were trying to do with the guitar?
I think so. I'm not sure if every student embraced it, just because of stylistic, but I certainly understood what my teacher was getting at.
And
the technique and the harmony. Obviously the technique you build from trying to play that. And trying to play it on an electric guitar with a plectrum as opposed to on a classical guitar with the fingers, as many classical guitarists have done with his partitas. But just to develop the right-hand technique and also harmonically the similarities of Baroque music and jazz, bebop particularly. And that was one of the things that Paul and I discussed when we first got together, and he wanted to do something combining Bach and jazz, and I remembered those times when I was playing Bach partitas and seeing how the harmony was similar to music of Charlie Parker and other bebop artists, and how whenever I worked on those partitas, it improved my technique as a jazz player. And every time I play some classical guitar, and every time I I visit that world for a while, a couple times a year. I come back refreshed and feeling that my technique has improved. I can bring that to the jazz side of my playing as well.
You mentioned improving your technique. I'm wondering if there's an emotionality in Bach's music that nourishes you as well as an artist?
Well, again, it depends on who's performing Bach's music. I can't know how the music itself evokes emotion in me when I perform it, and when the people who perform Bach, who I enjoy, perform it, it is, yes, that emotion and that the building of, harmonically and musically of those lines that he writes. And I keep thinking about those solo violin pieces, and I played one of the solo cello pieces on guitar as well, and so the best performers of that, I think, sneak into my mind when I'm playing jazz lines that have similar shapes and help influence me. But obviously, you can read the music of Charlie Parker. You can read, all of his solos have been transcribed. You can read that music and sound very bland playing those notes. And while we don't have a recording of Bach playing those notes or the musicians he worked with playing those notes, we do have a recording of Charlie Parker playing those notes, and there's so much life and so much more life in the recording that appears on the paper. It doesn't. You have to listen to him perform them to really understand what's coming off the paper, and maybe just the hearing how Charlie Parker actually performs those notes that I've read, then I go look at notes written by anyone, including Bach, and maybe it's a little more a bird coming in to my interpretation of Bach. Just how certain notes jump out, and it isn't just a computer just playing every note with a single volume. There's so much expressiveness, which and probably when I play Bach's music, it's may not be a Baroque interpretation. It's some sort of combination of everything I've listened to, and I'm probably playing it the way Charlie Parker might have played it, because I've listened to him more than I've listened to Baroque music.
Let me ask, if Bach was alive today, you've already mentioned how his lines influence or that look similar to other jazz artists. Would Bach be a jazz keyboard player?
Well, it's.
I'm asking you off the top of my head. Make a speculation.
I've been told that he was an improviser and a great improviser. As was Mozart, as were many classical musicians. And we've talked about improvisation, Paul and I, and the other musicians with the Bach Society, and how Baroque improvisation is more embellishing of the melody and ornamentation, and jazz improvisation is more making up something completely different based on the harmony. But I'm sure Bach would have been intrigued by that, and if he was already interpreting things and reinterpreting them, he would have been an improvising musician. There's no question in my mind. Bach, alive today, would be famous. He wasn't famous in his life. So if he was the same guy, he would have probably been doing whatever he had to do to get by. And if he was intrigued by improvisation, he might not have been able to to express himself in that way, because he had to pay the bills. That's the way he lived his life then, so it depends on his circumstance, of course.
That sounds like a very wise answer. Thank you.
Sure.